Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 12th, 2006. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week we take you to a demonstration of what happens behind closed doors in judging a beer competition. In fact, one of the most important beer competitions at the Great American Beer Festival. While we were in Denver a couple of weeks ago for the GABF, the Brewers Association put on a demo for members of the press to show what goes on as the beers are compared against each other to see who comes out on top. It's something that's normally not seen unless you're a judge, because actual judging sessions are normally closed. Well, before we listen in on the judging, let's listen in on what our listeners are saying by looking in the mailbag. Tor in Denmark writes, I just wanted to tell you a little tale about my experience with fruit beer, inspired by your fruit beer show where Randy Mosher said strawberries weren't the best fruit in beer. A brew buddy of mine and I set out to brew a blueberry ale, but blueberries weren't around at a reasonable price, so we went to the supermarket and found ourselves some bags of frozen woodberries mix that included a large quantity of blueberries together with raspberries and strawberries. Tor says, I think it was something like 50% blueberries, 45% raspberries, and 5% strawberries. Well, Tor says brewing day came, and we threw the first 800-gram bag of frozen berries into the last 15 minutes of the boil, and after cooling and yeast pitching, we threw another 800-gram bag of berries into the primary, and lastly, the last 800-gram bag into secondary. We now had a brown ale-looking kind of brew that had a sweet taste to it with lots of different fruit nuances. Tor says we put it on kegs after a third fermentation and let it mature for 2 months. In this time, it just kept getting drier and drier like white wine, while the strawberry taste came more and more through, and finally there was nothing but strawberries to the taste. The color of the beer went from a brown ale to a reddish-brown color like strawberry marmalade, but totally clear like an Irish red. We now had the soon-to-be-famous Strawberry Boom Ale. It went on to win second place at the regional competition, flunking on the weak head only, Tor says. So brewing with strawberries, he says, is possible and very dangerous, in quotation marks, if you wish to brew a multiple berries ale. Well, Tor, I assume by very dangerous you mean very drinkable. So there you go. Randy Mosher said that strawberries weren't the best to brew in fruit beers because their flavor doesn't come through. But there's proof that maybe if you try hard enough, you can get the strawberry flavor in your beer. We appreciate that story from Tor. Dan in Aspen, Colorado says, I know that Basic Brewing has listeners just about everywhere. My friend lives in France, and she cannot find a brew shop in France to get started. I remember one show where you found one in Europe, but was that in France or another country? Well, Dan, I think that was in Germany, where we connected Basic Brewing listeners together. What about that? Are you in France? If you are in France and you know of a homebrew shop in the heart of wine country over there, just drop me a line, let me know, and I'll pass that information on to Dan. Now, we are very lucky to have brewers tuning in, as it were. You don't really tune in to Basic Brewing Radio, but downloading Basic Brewing Radio all over the place, all over the world. And I certainly enjoy hearing from people all over. And you can see where some of them out there, or some of you are out there on our Frapper map, which now has more than 550 pins in it. So thanks, everybody, for taking time to let us know where you are. Eric from American Canyon, California writes, I recently saw your podcast video on brewing a six-pack IPA. I noticed you used smaller carboys and was curious if you can use them to make smaller batches instead of using the larger carboys. I ask because I'm disabled and lugging around all the full carboys and equipment is physically beyond my ability. Eric says, also, how do you do the recipes for the smaller batches? I really want to get into brewing, but due to my limitations, normal brewing is difficult at best. Well, Eric, you sure can brew small batches, just like we did in our six-pack IPA episode. We were using 1-gallon jugs. It would be perfect. Brewing small batches would be perfect for those who are not physically able to wrangle the heavy carboys or the big fermentation buckets. It's also great for those with limited space, say if you're in an apartment or something like that, or if you just want to play with ingredients without making a full 5 or 10 gallon batch. If you want to try some specialty grains if you've never tried before, or an adjunct that you hadn't used, or just want to try out a new recipe, just do a small batch. And to get the volume for a small batch, simply divide a standard recipe to get the volume that you want. If you want to do 1 gallon, simply divide a 5-gallon batch recipe by 5, and that ought to do it. You know, Steve and I found that working in the small batches is a whole lot of fun. It takes only a fraction of the time of a regular brew day because the wort heats up, comes up to boil very quickly, and it cools down very quickly in just an ice bath in the sink. So it's a lot less trouble than making a full 5 or 10 gallon batch of beer. So go for it, Eric, and let us know if you have any questions along the way. Brian from Whitby, Ontario, Canada asks, "Listen to your interview with Charlie Papazian last night. In it, you mentioned that you had videotaped that session and would be posting it in the future. Are there still plans to do so?" Well, yes. In fact, we videotaped an entirely separate interview in Charlie's living room. So it's new stuff. It's not stuff that you heard on the show before. That interview will run next week in Basic Brewing video. In that interview, Charlie lets us in on the story of how he came up with the famous relax, don't worry, have a homebrew catchphrase. Now, I'd never heard that story. It's a fun story. You'll have to tune in or download next week on Basic Brewing video. We shot a bunch of brewery tours while we were in Colorado, and I'm planning to use them to help take Basic Brewing video to an every other week schedule. We've been kind of hit and miss on when we are posting new shows, but I want to get on a more regular basis, because I'm obsessive compulsive. The video podcast takes a lot more time to produce and a lot more effort. I actually have to look halfway presentable, and we have to get together with Steve, and combining our schedules or coordinating our schedules is kind of tough sometimes. So I've been wanting to get back to a regular schedule or get to a regular schedule with a video side. So I hope that we can do that with the material that we got in Colorado as a kind of bridge to help us get to that. Greg from Brisbane writes in with a clarification on his weights and measures conversion spreadsheet that's posted on basicbrewingradio.com. Greg says, with regard to the quantity converter, some of my friends and fellow listeners were a little confused with the calculations, mainly because we are so used to the British imperial system. Greg says, just to clarify, on his Excel spreadsheet, measurements are calculated from U.S. measurements to metric, but some people don't realize that the traditional gallons, etc., that we once used in Australia were imperial measures, not avoirdupois U.S. measures. Therefore, my conversions from USA avoirdupois into metric and not imperial avoirdupois into metric. This is probably a minor concern for most, but I didn't want my people to think my calculations were incorrect, and it would be too confusing to add imperial measurements, and it's probably unnecessary when you provide measures in U.S. avoirdupois. Thanks for the clarification, Greg, and thanks for adding avoirdupois to my vocabulary. I think it essentially means weights and measures. And if I pronounced it wrong, you can blame the Merriam-Webster online dictionary because, if you click on the word on that on m-w.com, you get to hear it pronounced, which is very helpful for me. Okay. All right. Well, I got more good email, but I'm going to save it to a later show because I want to get to the main course of the show today. As I said at the beginning, in this past week's show, one of my goals in going to Colorado was to take you places that you would not have access to even if you had tickets for GABF and you were in the neighborhood. Each year, the Brewers Association holds a press event to talk about stories that they think are relevant and interesting, and trying to pitch those to the reporters. And this year they held in addition to that, they held a mock round of judging to show what goes on behind the closed doors of the GABF competition judging. They brought together world-class judges and had them evaluate a round of American pale ales. And while they were doing the initial sampling, they sit for a little bit and they sample and they smell and they look and they make notes. While they were doing that, I sneaked off to the side and spoke to Chris Swersey, who is in charge of the competition. And I apologize, I accidentally called him Sweeney at first, but, first time we'd met. Now, you may have a little trouble hearing some of the back and forth around the table during the discussions post-tasting, but listen closely. I think it's worth it. If you're a home brewer who enters competitions, this may give you kind of a look into what the judging is like, so that may give you some better strategy on how to enter your beers and how to look at the feedback that you get from the judges after the competition. So I think it's very interesting to hear how these beers are judged, and especially how precise these judges talk about what they're tasting. So listen in. Here we go.
Range from deep golden to copper in color. The style is characterized by fruity, floral, and citrus-like American variety hop character, producing high hop bitterness, flavor, and aroma. Notice that floral and citrus-like American variety hop character is the perceived end, but may be a result of the skillful use of hops and other national origins. American pale ales have medium body and low to medium maltiness. Low caramel character is allowable. Fruity ester flavor and aroma should be moderate to strong. Diacetyl should be absent or present at very low levels. Chill haze is allowable at cold temperatures. Specs on this beer: original gravity, 11 to 12.5 degrees Plato. Apparent extract is 2 to 3.5 degrees Plato. Alcohol by volume is 4.5 to 5.5%. Bitterness in international bittering units is 28 to 40. And color in EBC is 12 to 28 EBC. Anybody, before we get started, anybody have any questions or comments on these guidelines? Pretty good. Okay. We have 9 beers, and we'll get started.
Good afternoon, judges. My name is Arnie. I'll be your table captain today. This is my assistant, Kim. Are you guys prepared for ready to be served beers? Excellent.
So this is all about American hops.
American hops.
Showcase one. Perceived as American hops.
Chris, can I get kind of a play-by-play of what they're doing right now?
You bet. Yeah.
And you're giving Chris Sweeney?
Swersey. And I'm the competition manager for the Great American Beer Festival.
Now, in this quiet part, what are they doing?
Right now, they're being presented with the beers. They're looking at them, and they're kind of getting an idea of the color range of the beers that are out there. They have an expectation in this style that'll be kind of a pale amber color, sort of an orange, maybe real dark yellow to orange color, maybe into pale amber, that kind of color range. And they might see a beer that's looking on the dark side or looking on the pale side. Maybe already getting some ideas about whether it might fit the style or not, just based on that. Another thing you'll see them doing is a lot of times they'll mix the beers up. We ask them to do that intentionally. We don't want them sampling. We don't want each judge sampling in the same order. We want them to randomize the samples, and that gives a much truer representation throughout the. It's more of a mechanical issue, but the beer you just tasted before definitely affects the way you taste the next beer. So there are sampling issues that we try to iron out based on things like that. So they'll mix the beers up. They're looking at things like clarity. If the beer is supposed to be a filtered style or if it's supposed to be an unfiltered style, is it really clear? Is it supposed to have yeast in it? Where's that yeast? Most of the styles are supposed to be clear, though, so they're looking at that, and then they'll start to get some idea of aromas. They'll start picking them up and smelling them, and then they'll start tasting and make a lot of notes. The notes go back to the brewery. So the brewers get some idea of what was perceived by each individual judge that tasted their beer, at least in the first round. And this is a first round tasting.
And these beers are all numbered. There's no labels. There's no brands. They don't know who they're tasting.
Correct. Yeah. The beers speak for themselves. The only thing that there is, they're in identical plastic cups with random numbers on them. There's no brand information on there at all. There's no $1 million marketing campaign that's going to support that beer against its competitors on the table. It has to stand on its own two legs. It's all at our competition. It's all about the beer. It's not about anything else. It's not about, is that my friend that brewed it? Do they have a really good commercial with lots of bikinis in it? It's all about beer, and we try to remove any kind of outside influences like that and make it about beer rather than about brand loyalty or gimmicks or anything like that.
We've got 7 judges around this table. Is that a standard number, and who are these people?
6 or 7 judges is exactly standard for us. We don't like to have fewer than 6. We don't like to have more than 7. Most of our tables, about half the tables are 6 and about half are 7. The idea there is that if it's a really large first round, we can split that table in half and still get each beer tasted by at least 3 judges or 4. As far as who these guys are, this is a panel of real rock stars. These are some of the best judges that we have.
Can you kind of go around the table?
Yeah. Guy on the left there is Chuck Skypack from Bosco's in Tennessee, and Chuck also used to be on the board for the Brewers Association. But I first met Chuck in '95, I think, was my first year judging, and he was my roommate. He was my judge roommate, and I got to know him, and certainly got to respect his beers. I made a point of just going to visit his booth because he was my roommate, and I was blown away with his beers. And as I've gotten to do this job, Chuck has stayed on judging, and that's the one thing I don't get to do anymore is judge. But and Chuck has a remarkable palate, and he's an incredibly gifted brewer. Next is Nick Fennell, and he's from back east also. He's got a British accent that you guys will pick up on, and he tends to do a lot of good work in British styles, pale ale, summer ale, brown ales in particular, and porters, and brings a very particular perspective on brewing based on that to our judge panel, and a certain expertise. And that's something that we strive for, is to bring in a lot of very, very different perspectives and biases on beer and throw them in and see what happens.
So you might throw somebody in who's maybe not accustomed to a certain style to bring a certain perspective?
Maybe. It depends on who else is at that table. And that's part of my job, is to make sure that each table of judges makes sense based on what styles are there. One of the things that you can't have is you can't have judges at a table in which there's a style they might have a beer entered in. So if Nick's got an American Pale Ale in the competition, he can't sit at this table. And there's an ethical consideration there. Not only might you recognize your own beer, you might recognize the competitor too, and you might work towards getting that beer eliminated from the competition. So we just remove that. We just take that away. And that, again, it's not about who your friends are or your enemies. It's just about the beer. And the other thing is that heading into this, we ask the judges to let us know what categories they like, which ones they consider themselves expert in. So not only do we ask them what they can't judge, and then we also go in and look at that, but they also tell us what they'd like to judge and what they're good at. And over time, I have a real good feel for who's good at what, but also they are good at telling me what they're good at. And so I know I'm going to have a group of guys that really want to be at that table. they care about the style, or they want to, or they've been trying a lot of them because maybe they're planning to do one of those brews in the next year or two, and they want to learn. They want to see what's out there, see what's good.
Who else have we got around the table?
Next to Nick is Rich Tucciaroni. He's from Kona Brewing in Hawaii. Next to him is Melissa Osborne from Four Peaks. She's from Tempe, Arizona. And she's married to another brewer from the Phoenix area. The two of them are both very, very good brewers. She's dynamite. Next to her is Mitch Steele from Stone Brewing. He's from San Diego. And then Tim Schwartz from Real Ale in Austin, Texas. And then last is Lauren Salazar from New Belgium. And she runs the sensory program at New Belgium and has obviously a very, very fine palate. She's also a brewer in her own right and very, very talented at what she does. So she's kind of the hometown lady here.
As I understand, she's responsible for La Valie. We interviewed her husband
partially,
the other day.
I mean, she and her husband are, intricately entwined in the Belgian beer scene at New Belgium, and she's very, very good at what she does. She's become a bit of a rock star on our panel. She's really good at picking out things that a lot of people just don't find. She has a tremendous palate, very, very good demeanor, excellent leadership skills at the judge table, and she's, in the last 5 years has gained a lot of people's trust because they know that she's usually right. And that's what you want. You want judges that can, articulate what it is that they're tasting, put their finger on things that are really subtle, and then interpret that and say, what does that mean about beer? How does that make me feel about this beer style, about this individual beer that's in front of me? That's a hard job, and it's hard to put into words. She's very good at that.
So this isn't an isolated, they're not judging these things in an isolated form. They're sharing information back and forth. And
right now they're experiencing the beers as individuals. They're looking at them, they're smelling them, they're tasting them, they're writing down notes, kind of experiencing those beers and saying, what does that beer mean to me? And that's kind of boring to watch. The real candy here is listening to the discussion that's going to follow, and that's more collaborative, and that's all about experiencing beer as a group of really highly trained people, and that's the neat part about this whole thing. As individuals, what they're doing right now is pretty cool, but for you guys, the best part is yet to come when they start talking about what it's like, what each beer is doing for them, and you'll see a lot of agreement. Sometimes you'll see some disagreement too. We don't expect everybody to be in lockstep, and they don't have to agree all the time. They do have to consent at the end of the day. That's different from saying I agree with you. But they have to, in the end, they do have to pick the three best beers, and then they do have to decide, are these world-class beers? They don't have to award all three medals. They usually do, but they don't have to. And particularly in a real small category, it's very likely there may not be three world-class beers there. So they may not award all three medals.
So as coordinator, do you have to keep those personalities in mind and head off any maybe personality clashes that you might have? Or
part of that is self-policing. Demeanor is a huge part of this whole thing. There's enough pressure at the tables here, and I'm constantly going through the rooms and listening to what's going on. I take demeanor complaints real seriously, and it's very rare that a judge will say anything negative about another judge. Usually if I do hear one complaint about a judge, I usually hear more than one, and that's a quick ticket to stay home during September. But the judges, it's self-selecting in a big way.
So how is this different from, say, the American Homebrewers Association national judging?
One of the other folks asked me a question about point systems and things like that. We don't use a point system at all. It's more about an overall impression of each beer. It's not. We don't try to quantify things like that. At the very end, in a medal round, if there's a table that just can't make up its mind, they might actually make a little ballot square and say, this is my 1, my 2, my 3, and then add it up and just see who the winners are. If it comes down to a really tight, very competitive race where they just all look at each other and agree that, boy, that's just the only way we can do it. They might actually do it that way, but as far as assigning a value to the color or the aroma or the balance of the beer and the carbonation, they don't do it like that. They kind of look at a sum total of their impressions of each of those aspects, and then they have that conversation.
How are the styles determined? Who is it that determines that there's going to be like an American light lager this year or something like that?
Charlie does the guidelines, and his guidelines cover virtually every beer out there. Then as far as what's going to be in the competition, that's a conversation that Charlie has with me. I kind of come up with a proposal based on how many entries we have had in the past and how many we anticipate, and then we'll kind of like group some things together, that might be smaller, just so that they can compete, so that there's a home for them. It's really important that we have that. Even if it's a small category, we still want those brewers to have the ability to send those beers. And then we might have a back and forth on a couple of categories, and then we kind of settle in on something for that upcoming competition. But it's all based on the Brewers Association style guidelines.
So it's an evolutionary thing that is kind of driven by the industry and not the other way around.
Yeah, we don't tell them what to brew. They tell us what they're brewing, and then we try and make the guidelines fit as broadly as we can to accommodate. And again, we're trying to pitch as big a tent as we can, to make a place for everybody to come and play. And that's, from the smallest little brewery to the biggest brewery there is. We try and make room for everybody. And it's one of those places where everyone can go and compete on an even footing. Again, it's just all about the beer. You look at that cup and you don't know who brewed that. You just know, at the end of the day, if our judges say, hey, this is world-class beer, you can believe it. It doesn't matter who's telling you about it or, who's getting paid a lot of money to talk about it or slick campaigns. That has no bearing at all on our judging system.
I've heard some other beer lovers talk about the categories, and they made that American light lager category just for the big guys, and I guess there is some truth to that because they're making the beer, and it is a legitimate style out there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't know what the point is. Of course, that category is there because those beers are there.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you have to like it.
It also doesn't mean you have to be big either. It's amazing. We in I think the late 90s we had a tiny brewery. I think it was from Colorado that brewed an American lager and got a silver medal. So there's a tiny brewery that's competing in a category that's normally the purview of really big guys. And I don't know if they sell a lot of that, but they chose to compete in that, and they were successful. So we create guidelines based on the marketplace and see what's out there, and anyone can compete.
We had a conversation with Peter Buchart up at New Belgium, and when I mentioned the word style, he got a little irritated with me because he doesn't consider his beers he's not brewing to style. Mm-hmm. But it seems like to me that this year I think Belgian beers were one of the fastest growing quote-unquote styles in the categories. So.
Belgian style beers are growing very fast in our industry. It's kind of our third wave right now, and Peter and I have some very, very deep conversations about what does style mean. He comes from a very Belgian perspective, and the world of beer in Belgium is incredibly complex, and it kind of defies categorization. So the very notion of style is almost foreign to his pedigree. But style, you couldn't have spoken to a more thoughtful person on that question. It's not an easy question. We judge to style because that's the way our competition is structured. It's hard to think of another way to do it any more fairly. That doesn't mean that a brewer is obligated to brew to style. We try and create these homes for the brewers to send their beers. We don't expect them to brew to that style. We expect them to brew what sells beer and what they choose to brew.
Well, there's some discussion starting up, so I have a feeling. I just have a feeling that we're watching a golf match or something.
Yeah,
So thank you for your time. We'll sneak back in there and listen to the conversation.
Enjoy.
Okay, but if you're all in agreement on that?
Yes, one I love on here, but I know it's wrong. There's one. It's the micro contamination. Where is it? 101.
Yes.
Yes.
That's my worst one.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I have.
A non-diacetyl making lacto. I would take this barrel. I'd put it in a barrel. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, it was really interesting as a Belgian style.
Yeah, fantastic.
Belgian single.
I was like, this is delicious. Wait, what category is this? That's wrong. I know it's wrong, but it's so right.
Yeah, lots of sourness to it.
Yes.
Very sour.
Agreement again?
So 101. Okay.
The judges are essentially coming to consensus on beers that don't meet style at this point.
Yeah.
145.
Character to it a little bit. It just wasn't that citrus.
Yeah, it had some sour citric notes to it. Citric acid kind of thing.
I would say that was kind of in the middle of the road. I thought there were some others that were worse.
Yeah.
That I would get rid of before that, but but it wasn't one of my favorites.
It's passable. No, it's not the top three, probably.
So one-sided.
I found a real strong roasty character in 156.
156.
Place.
Yeah, too dark malt character, almost an astringent roasty thing.
Vegetal.
In the aroma too. It was in the aroma.
It's an oxidized malt,
which
too, a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that raisiny,
That crystal
creamy.
malt raisin thing.
Certainly out of character for the style.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Pushing the
It was on the dark side of the color range too.
156.
Yes.
One more?
All right.
At 123.
I like that.
I'm there with you.
I like 123.
Yeah. And then it had this dull mouth coating quality that really
Revisit that.
it wasn't crisp and refreshing. It was a kind of dull, harsh bitterness.
I thought it was a little thin. It didn't have as much malt, as I'd like to see in the style. But
Had a nice citrus aroma, but
Yeah.
I was finding some winey notes.
I like that
one.
also. I don't know.
Compared to 145, I like that.
I just didn't like that bitter quality. It had a harsh
definitely.
bitterness to it.
145.
Did we even dump 145?
Was that in there?
I mean, I'm okay with getting rid of 145, but I'm not sure about 123. I'd like to keep that on the table for a little while.
I can agree with that.
I think we had some proponents of 145, though. Did we not?
Where's the love?
Yeah, I preferred 145 to 123.
Yeah.
Keep both of those on the table.
Okay.
What about going from the other end? Because
Yeah.
I had a strong preference for a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
167.
Yeah, I like that in 178.
Yeah, I like 178 and 112.
Yep.
Even though I thought 112 was a little on the light side for the color.
They're both
They're both on the light.
I thought
178
it
is
was a little
nice
light
too.
on the
Yeah.
flavor side.
I mean, 112
It had that really nice nose.
not deep golden,
Which one are we talking about?
really nice
112.
orange.
112 or 178? More
The
coffee.
112? Yeah,
I
it
like
does.
that.
It definitely has that citrusy one.
oh, it's orange.
Yeah,
It's an orange juice.
Lovely.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's Seville orange marmalade kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I think 178 is better hop cake.
I really like the
pretty
balance in
subtle.
178.
Yeah.
178,
I
yeah.
thought that was fantastic.
It was nice and clean, too. I mean,
Had a really good snap to the finish. It was really, really good clean bitterness.
Are we talking about 167?
Yeah, I think 178 is a definite keeper.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite.
good as well.
Have we talked about 167 yet?
167?
Mentioned we liked it.
What's that?
So you mentioned we liked it.
Okay, I didn't know.
I like
We were
it.
talking
It's
about
got similar qualities to 178. It's got the same kind of flavor profile, same tangerine, hop character.
I found that top character a little just over the top perfumey.
Yeah, I thought it was very rosy. I thought it was kind of bizarre for that.
Yeah,
Because
but
I have rose and perfume.
I like it. It had
but-
that hop ester character to it. I really like that.
I found it just a little bit over the top, just in that character. Certainly within style, but
It was one of the few that really had some ester character to it. Though. So many of them, it was just hop character, but no kind of ale
Fermentation
fruitiness.
derivatives.
Yeah. And that I liked because it had some yeast ester character as well as just fruitiness from the
Are you
hops.
talking about 167?
Yeah.
Oh, I picked it up as a geraniol hop and not ester.
that leaves the only beer we haven't discussed, I believe, is 112.
Yeah, like 112. That was probably my number 2 of the group. Even though, I mean, agreeing that it's a little light on the color side, but I just thought that the hop nose was great. And it just had a nice clean bitterness, nice dry finish.
I found it slightly salty. Salty. Not in a bad way, just the kind of fullness of palate.
Yeah.
I would think that mineral type character is desirable in this type of beer.
Yeah. It maybe doesn't make it as refreshing and drinkable as I would like this style to be, though. There's some others which are more refreshing.
It's kind of low and bitter. Enough. Has a kind of watery linger.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have a crisp finish.
It does kind of water out.
Yeah, just kind of just drops off rather than finish.
That's the only thing, with the being a little bit pale and that watery thing at the end of it. But it's still very good.
So anybody want to fight for 112?
I like it better than
I like it
better. Yeah, I would definitely fight for keeping it.
All right.
So.
I think topped at 145 and 123.
Yeah, 123 is my least favorite of what's left.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm not going to fight for 123. I think there's better beers.
I
kind of like it.
Yeah,
it's
got
some musky
it's definitely got some oxidation going on in 123.
Yeah, that's what the sweetness is.
Yeah.
It's kind of Englishy.
It is.
The hops are kind of dirty.
It has that kind of earthy skunk.
Okay, yeah.
But
so
1, 2, 3.
Not like stuff. Not like stuff, but the other kind of
Anybody have a least favorite of what we made group?
Actually, 145.
We're going to pick your top 3. Just go ahead and write it down there.
Does anybody disagree that 178 and 167 are the two best?
I think that's right.
I would have it.
So really, the third place or semi forward is between 112 and 145.
No. Yeah, not totally. I'm not exactly in that right now.
167 is questionable to me, although
Could do bronze,
we're just advancing.
Now. I mean, I can't imagine that it's a 145.
145 is probably my least preferred to those. I think there's more.
Some sour acidity.
There is some sourness and some oxidation. It's just not really fresh. I mean, I'm thinking of like nice, clean American hop aroma.
Yeah.
And it's not there.
I agree with that.
I do too. 145 just doesn't demonstrate the character that we think about in American Pale Ale. I agree.
That's it.
Okay, so we're advancing. We're advancing number 112, 167, and 178.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Nice job, everybody.
And just to verify, all 3, 112, 167. Everybody's in agreement?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me. I'll just hand this mic over to the judges, and you guys can do Q&A if you want. I need to leave because I'm going to be real busy for the next 24 hours. But I want to thank the judges. They've been tasting the world's best beer for the last 2.5 days, and this is kind of downtime for them. And I really very much appreciate you guys making the time to kind of put a really nice face on beer for the media. So thanks very much.
Czech Republic, the discussion you had here seems to be like a friendly discussion, no problems at all. How tough it can get when you left side fight for number 111, right side fight for 121, for example?
It stays friendly.
You want to address that?
No, I mean, I think in general it stays friendly the whole time, even when sometimes you're kind of fighting harder than you normally would. But
do you go back to samples, or you get more samples than?
Yes.
Then there's no more samples, or?
Oh no, yeah, we resample.
Yeah. We'll resample if necessary. We'll hold samples, have them re-pour with new numbers to try to eliminate any biases, and have a lot more discussion.
Or something.
Well, there is. I'm a big believer in the table coming to a consensus agreement, but there's some sort of last-ditch measures too of making matrices and voting, but that's again last ditch.
When all else fails.
Yes.
When all else fails.
There's an odd number on the table, which helps.
You know, there are a lot of young people walking around just wondering what the qualifications are, other than being a brewer. Did you do the BJCP certification for
I think be certified. I mean, I guess Chuck, you could probably.
Well, BJCP, for those of you who don't know, is the Beer Judge Certification Program, which is a program run primarily by amateur homebrewers, hobbyists, which is a very good program for learning sensory perception. I'm in that program. You're in that program. But that's not a qualifying statement. The way that the judge pool is expanded is primarily through recruitment by existing judges, people that they know. If someone wants to be on the panel, I'm not sure I can tell you the exact criteria, but they essentially apply with Chris and need peer approval and demonstrated experience in the industry to have the experience and ability to sit on the panel.
And I noticed that you were kind of in the front. Are you the captain of the table, so to speak?
The table captain position is a position that's shared by experienced judges on the panel. So for instance, probably all of you served as table captains during this round. So sitting at a table, I'm not always a table captain, but there is someone that's assigned to be table captain to kind of make sure that order is kept and that everybody is introduced to each other, and to kind of lead the proceedings, not certainly dominate the proceedings, but just make sure that everything is proceeding in the manner a professional manner at the table, and that could be any one of us.
Right. Kind of apropos to that question of experience, do you all feel like you learn as you judge, and that you continue to learn as you go on in your judging career?
I think that's one of the reasons I judge is because it's a great way to learn from your peers, to explore beer categories that you don't necessarily know as much about as you'd like to. But it's one of the best ways of improving your beer. And I think that's one of the things that helps us. That once you're a judge, you become a better brewer. And you have to be a good brewer to start with, really. We're not all brewers who are judges. But it really helps. If you don't brew good beer, then you're not going to make it as far as the judging, because you're going to get thrown out earlier on because you're not going to be in the business. We're not the only ones judging beer here. Everybody who comes to the hall is going to be judging beer one way or another. And that's why we're not using a point system, because the average consumer who comes in is not going to be using a point system. They're going to be tasting beers and deciding whether they like them or not.
Another part to answer that is sensory analysis is practice. And so I think you do get better the more you judge. It's that.
Yeah, it's good to refresh, and when you're at a full table with 6 or 7 judges, certain people pick out things more easily than others, and so the person that might not be as familiar with an off flavor or even a regular flavor can kind of hone in on that and get better at it.
I think you maybe saw when some people would mention a particular flavor in a beer, other of us would pick up our glass and taste it. And it's something that maybe you didn't notice the next time. Maybe it's a power of suggestion, but you can then find it. So.
A couple questions. One is, do you, over the years, have you developed any techniques that you've used to increase your abilities to detect sensory perception? Address that one first.
That's what I do for a living. I do sensory training. So it's a lot of introducing attributes, specific chemical attributes, and beer beer attributes to people and saying this is what it is by bringing it out in the beer and telling them. So it's no longer just a description like plastic. It's a specific word. And so then we all agree on the word and we can understand each other. And so when I say phenolic, everybody knows at the table what I'm talking about. If I say it's a bubblegum phenol, and we all understand the same thing, instead of saying it's kind of plasticky or it's fruity. If you say fruity, that doesn't mean anything because it could be what fruit. There's a lot of fruits out there, and is it an ester fruit, is it an oxidation fruit? And you just training every day, things like that. And then just discussion panels like this, just doing it day in and day out. I think just tasting your own beer, tasting other people's beer. This is so good.
Tasting the beer throughout the process too, tasting it, from raw materials. A lot of us, taste everything. Your water, your barley malts, your hops, brewing up little hop teas even to evaluate the aroma characteristics, and just taking it all the way through fermentation because, a batch that's been recently brewed is maybe 24 hours, 36 hours into fermentation will have a lot of different aroma and flavor components going on that will kind of round out and, meld together throughout the process. So it's just really becoming familiar with it from raw materials all the way through finished, and then even taking it beyond that to, those of us that are packaging our beers too, and storing our beers for 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, a year under optimum conditions, adverse conditions, room storage, and then tasting them over time to really become familiar with all the attributes of your beer.
So you could actually make a hop tea, for instance, and taste it at one day and a week and see what the difference might be.
That would be more if we were evaluating a new hop variety to use. That would be one method. One method is just to rub samples, but also to make a little tea and sample it in a lab type or in a controlled environment to see what kind of characteristics. Because when you're brewing with it, some different flavor and aroma characteristics will come out versus looking at just the raw material. When you're actually heating it and it's dissolving in the soluble media, different attributes will come out. So something that might be more really grassy and earthy when you're rubbing it, you brew a tea with it and you're getting some maybe a little more fruity notes or some citrus notes might come out, and some of the more volatile components.
The other part of my question was, there are, 7 people at this table. When you're discussing something, for instance, with the sensory perception, something like a vegetal taste, every person's perception of what is vegetal could be different. How do you cross that?
There are some industry standards for what vegetal means. There are chemical compounds. You can buy actual kits, and there are training courses that you can do that kind of standardize so everybody has a benchmark for what vegetal is, a specific compound. Gary Spedding could probably tell you more about those kits than we do because he deals with that. He actually comes in at the beginning of the judge orientation to just run through a few of those kind of things so everybody is on the same page as far as that concerns. The same way as we have the guidelines for the beers, there are guidelines for flavors. So when we are talking about specific flavors, we all know what each other means. We're not saying one person says vegetable, half of us are thinking cabbage, somebody's thinking carrots, somebody's thinking potatoes. There's a definite vegetal flavor, and it's known to all the brewers here what we're looking for when we hear that word.
With this set of beers, you were able to eliminate about half of them with some obvious flaws. Is that typical?
This judging session, these last 3 days, it hasn't been typical. I've been very impressed with the quality of the beer. And when we had a flight of 9 to 12 beers, we were talking stylistic differences in balance, flavor balance, things like that in the very first round. It was the quality of the beers was excellent.
I think by way of explanation, and this is staged, and I think Chris fed us a particular range of beers so we would encounter as many situations as possible.
Just to add to that, this is a huge category, and it takes 3 rounds of judging to get through all the styles. I think it was 5 tables of judges that started out. I gave these guys some softballs. We picked 3 beers that got kicked right in the first round, and then 3 beers that made it to the second round but got kicked, and then the 3 that were finalists. And I happen to know that. Nice job, crew. But the other thing is that by the time you get to that third round, there isn't a whole lot of beer left on those, and so only one of the beers at the table, I think, was a medalist, because when you get to that final table, there's an awful lot of repouring that goes on. Well, these guys want to enjoy those.
It's worth saying, when you get to one of those final rounds with 12 beers or so, and that they're all very good, and it becomes very hard.
It's not easy to dump. It's tricky,
Yeah. Also, as far as the beer judging goes, normally we're filling out for the brewers some evaluation forms, so people don't tend to send the same bad beer twice. They get feedback as to why we think it's bad. We're not just saying that's no good and dumping it. The brewers are going to get some feedback on that, and they're able to improve their beer, hopefully. That's another reason we enter our beers, is we get blind tasting that we have nobody here has any prejudice, because we don't know what the beers are. When it's tasted, it's either good, bad, faults, whatever it may be. And we as brewers get feedback on that, and we can address those and use that to improve our beer. So the longer these contests go on and the more people enter them, the better their beer hopefully gets, because they take on that feedback and realize where those off flavors may be coming from, so the next year their beer's a better beer.
We went through that.
Slips, or is it one table?
Every judge individually does it.
For every beer?
Yes, we went through that first portion of quiet evaluation very quickly on purpose. That is we would take that part where we were taking notes and tasting and writing in a typical session would be longer.
Okay. So if you have an entry fee and you might not win a medal, but sensory, like if you had sent your beer out for a sensory evaluation and got back this kind of information, it's amazing. It's much more expensive than that, and so we try to be as specific as possible. So when you get it back, it's not just thanks for trying, whatever. It's something so specific. So you could go to your raw materials, or go to your fermentation process, or your yeast handling, and it's so specific that you say, and it's kind of like, it's hopefully that's the way that you address it. You see, you're not like it's there, and there was my problem, and it's not. It's right there, and then you can go and try to figure out what went wrong.
Yeah, if there's an off flavor in a beer, and we as brewers know where it came from, we'll put down, we think you're doing this wrong, and try and help. We're trying to help people out to make better beer, because the more good beers there are out there, the more people are going to drink beer. If by a random selection of beer, it's a 50-50 chance whether you're going to get a good beer or a bad beer. That hurts all of us. So it benefits all of us to have other people brewing good beer as well.
And on the other end of that is, if somebody's doing something really right, if the hop aroma's there and just dead on, we say nice job, great hop aroma, perfect malt balance. There's even, it comes down to, just with the quality of the beers, there's a lot of times you'll have, 6 excellent beers representative of the style, and we have to pick 3 to medal. So, those comments on the other ones, it's, great beer, others were better. So,
I think a big challenge to being a judge is you got to be deconstructive and constructive at the same time, and that can be a challenge.
So there you go. I was very impressed by the precise and efficient way the judges were able to go through that judging process. Thanks to everybody who was involved in that demonstration. I thought it was very interesting, very helpful. Hope you did too. You could tell they had a lot of experience in picking out the various elements that make up a beer, good and bad. And I was also interested to hear them talk about the 1 or 2 beers that they liked, but then eliminated because they didn't fall within the style guidelines. Now, speaking of styles, next week we head to a place where style is a dirty word, New Belgium Brewing in Fort Collins, Colorado. We'll talk to Eric Salazar, whose wife Lauren we just heard on the judging panel. Eric will let us in a bit on the process of blending La Folie, the wonderful New Belgium sour beer. Also, we talked to brewmaster Peter Buchart about beer styles, or lack thereof, and his philosophy of brewing. Now, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, write to james@basicbrewing.com or fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And while you're on our site, you can check out our online shop where you can find great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. And also, while I'm thinking about it, we're adding caps, Basic Brewing caps to the store. So they may be out there now, but they'll certainly be out in the next few days. So if you're like me and you wish that shampoos had sunscreen built in, or if you just like hats, go out there and look at the hats. And they'll go well with a shirt. You can have just a little combination there. You can also take a look at our DVDs, our Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, where we walk you through the extract brewing process, step by step from boiling to bottling. And in our Stepping into All Grain DVD, we take you through the all grain process, from milling your grain to collecting your wort, and giving you the choice to do either infusion mashing or step mashing, or fly sparging or batch sparging, all in that crazy DVD format thing. You can also see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can get it straight from me. I'll put it in a box and send it to you. Well, that's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio, Kelly designed our logo too, by the way. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time. So long.